Hello and welcome to the program. Ahead, broker downgrades for Seven West Media after a profit warning. MasterChef versus The Voice, the ratings juggernauts to go head to head. And we'll be joined by Chris Chapman, boss of the ACMA, to talk Kyle Sandilands, Olympics in 3D and calls for a super media regulator. But first, to the evidence given by Rupert and James Murdoch this week to the British inquiry into media ethics. The inquiry was sparked by the phone hacking scandal at News International's now defunct News of the World. Rupert Murdoch denied he used his media empire to influence politicians. Our co-host James Manning, the editor and publisher of Media Week, was watching and joins us now to tell us all. James, I guess what was the key takeaway from the hours and hours of questioning that you had?
Well, I guess the focus that's really shifted from phone hacking, if you like, which was, very much the focus last year when both James and Rupert gave evidence to the their relationship with the successive British governments. It was really, and I probably didn't expect, and maybe I didn't foresee it, but the big headline to come out of it was the effect on the British government. Jeremy Hunt, there's a lot of calls for him to stand down now over sort of information he was giving the News Corp camp regarding their B-Sky bid.
Well, it was interesting listening to Rupert Murdoch, and we've got a little snippet of some of the comments that he had to say about the influence, or rather the lack of influence, that his company has over politicians.
I want to put it to bed once and for all that that is a complete myth.
So what's the myth, Mr. Murdoch?
That I used the influence of the Sun or the supposed political power to get favourable treatment. I think that's part of the democratic process. All politicians of all sides, like to have their views known by the editors of newspapers or publishers, hoping that they will be put across, hoping that they will be that they will succeed in impressing people. That's the game.
Yeah, so just some interesting comments throughout the questioning. Are there any implications from this yet?
I don't think so. I mean, there's implications for the British government. As far as News Corp go, no, but I guess there's a lot of statements that Rupert Murdoch made about, his relationship with different prime ministers, which, if some of those people in turn front the inquiry, what will happen then? Will there be different versions of events? And we got to see probably a different Rupert Murdoch too. He was seen to be better prepared this time. He was perhaps more measured. Maybe he was a little bit nervous when we heard from him last year.
Well, he is in his 80s. How did he stand up to the hours? I think it was nearly 4 hours, wasn't it? He was giving evidence.
Yeah, apparently there was some commentary when they broke for lunch on the Wednesday, his first day of testimony. He's back on Thursday, of course. But he said, he muttered to an aide, "Look, I'd really like to get this over with today." That didn't happen. They broke up relatively early, about, I think, 3 p.m. or just after English in Wednesday afternoon in England, and said, "Look, we know it's an impost on you, but we really like you to get you back for Thursday's evidence," which promises to be pretty interesting. But I mean, he said a lot of interesting things too. Everything from he was asked about his Twitter account, and some of the things he tweeted, and he said, "Look, don't take my tweets seriously. I think I was saying the extremists from both sides were pulling on me, and that created a lot of commentary about, look, maybe some of your journalists should understand about Twitter like you do, that, they spend a lot of time on Twitter and chasing up other people's comments." His comment about the BBC, he said, "Look, did he lobby the government about the BBC? Look, he said, I've given up talking to politicians about the BBC. They all say they hate it, and they go and give it everything they want." So it was some sort of quite interesting insights you got from him.
And obviously his son James Murdoch was questioned the day prior to him. Here's just a little bit of what James Murdoch had to say before the inquiry.
Yeah, I think all politicians
would be interested to know that and would seek the support of newspapers and the media. That's, very much part of the way they see their job as communicators, and to use Justice Leveson's phrase, to be able to avail themselves of that megaphone, if you will, for their own policies and purposes. I think that's reasonably evident.
James, how was James Murdoch's questioning, I guess, different from what Rupert Murdoch was getting?
You got a little bit more about the News of the World. The counsel for Leveson, Robert Jay, started at one stage to ask him about, the tone of the paper, that what did he think about the paper. James replied, look, it was one of many businesses I started off there I had to look after. I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about the content of the newspaper. It was very profitable. He said, look, did the end justify the means? And he said, well, no, not really. Because look what happened. The paper ended up dying because of what it did.
But obviously, as you mentioned before, his testimony's already claimed the scalp of one ministerial advisor. So the focus really
there's a lot of pressure on the minister, and there were so many newspaper headlines that Justice Leveson himself sort of made a note before the hearing on Wednesday, saying to people, look, perhaps best not to rush to judgment on the testimony we've heard on Tuesday. We'll wait till we see. I think Jeremy Hunt himself's going to be before the inquiry, and I think he said, look, I'd like to have my appearance brought forward so we could address these matters. So it'd be fascinating to hear from his side of the story, I guess.
We did see News Corp's attempt to take over the rest of the B-Sky B that it doesn't own scuttled as a result of the phone hacking scandal. Is there any sense that perhaps they may be forced to sell all of their B-Sky B stake, or what could be the sort of cost for News Corp as a result of all of this? I
can't see anything at the moment. It's got to play out, I guess, the rest of the inquiry. We hear from other people. You'd have to think it'd be pretty unlikely that they're going to get total control, certainly any time soon, from the wash-up of all this, but I think it remains to be seen what will eventually happen there.
All right, one to watch. James, thanks for that. Let's just turn now to another big story this week. Seven West Media issuing a profit warning, saying an anticipated improvement in the advertising market was unlikely to be met. The market was expecting earnings before interest and tax of around 509 million Australian dollars, but Seven West Media expects this will be closer to between 460 and 470 million dollars. The company owns the Seven Network, the West Australian newspaper, magazine publications, and the joint venture with Yahoo 7. Well, James, wanted to get your thoughts on this. This was quite a surprise coming after market close with Seven. What's the implication for this? Could we see other media companies forced to do something similar?
Yeah, you'd think. I think media companies were reluctant to give much of a forecast, Seven included, I think, in their sort of first half updates in February this year. We'd mentioned a few times on the show David Leckie's comment that you can understand why executives are careful what they say in briefings, because people hang on every utterance. And David Leckie, in one statement, he said, look, he was asked about recovery, and he said, look, you wouldn't be surprised if there was an uptick in the economy post-Easter. You've got to think, well, that's probably, they think that's probably not going to happen now. So whether other people will react and find that's out there remains to be seen.
The news obviously had quite an impact on Seven's share price. Let's just get a check on the media sector's performance on the share market this week. Here's Chris Weston from IG Markets.
Yeah, good afternoon, Bridie. Obviously a very disappointing day for shareholders of Seven West Media. Stock's trading at $3.21, down about 15% at the moment. It's trading through the November uptrend at $3.68. So I think all eyes now really focus on around the sort of $3.05 level, which was the low that we saw back in November, where we then saw a 35% rally up until the March highs. But I think, the stock had got probably a little bit ahead of itself. I think people were looking at the ratings momentum, the revenue momentum, obviously the market share, and suggesting we were going to see a very good year for the company. And the stock prior to today, although it had come off its highs of $4.10, was up 16%. Now, you know, I think obviously this does have mild implications for other stocks. I don't think anyone really expected the ad market to be on fire this year. This was more a story about what was happening in Seven West and the ratings momentum, and I think we've seen a bit of that pare back. The outlook statement by the company today that, you know, they are seeing conditions, you know, not as perhaps as strong in all segments as the market had been anticipating, are a bit of a blow and do change confidence in the stock. I think probably the bigger driver for me, and I think probably the bigger interest here is the cost blowout. You know, we are expecting TV cost content to go up 8 to 9% this year, which effectively gives another 60 million additional costs going into the second half. You know, the downgrade to 460 to 470 for full year EBIT implies a 16% decline from the 2011 highs as well, and the consensus was for 511, hence why we've seen such a dramatic reaction today. But the cost blowout, I think, are probably the bigger driver here. And is it going to be thematic across all different stocks? The only other stock that I've seen which is really falling away today is Fairfax, which is down 2%. Most of the other media stocks are doing okay. So I don't think the market's getting overly worried about this result. I think the ad market wasn't expected to be very strong. Consumer sentiment's still very weak, and we've got to probably wait until post the election until we start seeing a ramp up in that expenditure. So I don't think this is an overall market story. This is specific, probably more in the price action relates to that. Issues with the balance sheet, you're looking at gearing or net debt to EBITDA of about 3.4 times next year, so it's a little bit of a worry. But on the valuation, now that it's dropped to where it is at the moment, 310.21, if you look at the re-ratings, and most brokers have chopped this stock up today, Goldman's, UBS, CSLA, you know, you name it, most brokers have downgraded the stock at some stage. But let's use Credit Suisse's full year EPS for next year at 34 cents. Let's use the most bearish at Goldman Sachs at 26 cents for EPS for next year, and work in somewhere with a couple of the brokers in between, and let's get an average of that about 32 cents. On current projection, that puts on about 10.5 times forward earnings, which is trough earnings for any company in the media space. So the multiple for the company now is very much undemanding, and I don't think it's going to have a huge fall from here. So I think probably the bulk of the selling has been done. It's still an attractive dividend yield, although there are worries about the sustainability of that dividend over the course of time. But I think the downside will probably be limited to at least 305 in the short term. I think that'll be very good buying around those kind of levels, but clearly a very disappointing day for shareholders nonetheless.